The breach expansion protocols hadn't been updated since the last Kaiju wave. 5 years of quiet had made that seem reasonable. The duty officer on watch that morning, a lieutenant whose name would later be redacted from official reports, saw the anomaly at 0600 Pacific time and followed procedure. Logged it. Tagged it for analysis. Sent the ping to the science division's overnight queue. By 0603, 3 separate monitoring stations had registered the same irregularity. By 0605, Herman Gottlieb was awake and reading raw sensor data on his tablet, still in his quarters. The numbers didn't make sense. Breach signatures followed predictable patterns. 5 years of observation had established baseline parameters. Frequency peaks occurred in clusters, single-phase oscillations that spiked before Kaiju emergence. Clean. Documentable. Repeatable. This wasn't that. Gottlieb pulled up the waveform display. 3 distinct peaks overlapped where there should be one. The interference pattern looked deliberate, not random. He scrolled through 16 minutes of accumulated data, searching for the error in the collection software. There was no error. He called the command center at 0612. "This is Dr. Gottlieb. I need the marshal on comms, now." The overnight watch coordinator didn't argue with that tone. 30 seconds of hold music, some brass band arrangement that Gottlieb had always found insulting. Then Marshal Sarah Torres picked up. "Doctor, it's early. The breach is doing something new." Torres didn't waste time asking if he was sure. Define new. Triple-phase frequency deviation. 47% variance from Precursor baseline. It's either a massive sensor malfunction across 3 independent arrays, or something is interfering with their portal infrastructure. He heard her breath change. That quick inhale that meant priorities had just shifted. "Sending you tactical feed access now," Torres said. "I want a confirmation in 10 minutes. If this is real, we go to code black." The line cut. Gottlieb, dressed in 4 minutes, made it to the science wing in 6. The emergency lighting was already on standard procedure when anomaly alerts hit certain thresholds. His workstation booted while he was still pulling his chair forward. Newton Geisler was already there. "Tell me you're seeing this too," Newt said. He looked worse than usual, unshaven, eyes red. "Tell me I'm not having another episode." Gottlieb didn't look at him. "You're not. The data's consistent across all monitoring platforms." "Good. That's good." Newt's fingers drummed against the desk. Stopped. Started again. Except it's not good. Because if the readings are accurate, the precursors are running some kind of multi-signal experiment, and we have no idea what it's for. Perhaps Gottlieb pulled up comparative analysis. Or they've lost control of something. Newt went still. That particular kind of stillness that Gottlieb had learned to recognize over the years. The freeze response of someone whose brain had been inside a hive mind and couldn't quite forget it. "Newt, I hear it." Newt's voice had gone flat. "Not like before. Not precursors. There's 3 parts. Distinct. Like a chord instead of a note." Gottlieb's hand hovered over the intercom button. "I'm calling medical." "Don't!" Newt shook his head sharp and quick. "I'm fine. It's just residual sensitivity." "But Herman, I've been in their heads. I know what they sound like." "This isn't them." "Then what is it?" "I don't know." Newt looked at the waveforms on screen. "But they're trying to sync with it. And I think they're failing." The emergency alert cut through the room at 0623. Not a drill tone. The real thing. Gottlieb hit the intercom. "This is Science Division." "What's happened?" The response came from Torres directly. "Breach window just opened. Sector 77 Delta. Something's coming through." "Kaiju signature." "Negative. Mass is wrong. Shape is wrong. Jaeger teams are scrambling now. I need you in command in 2 minutes." They made it in 90 seconds. The main screen showed satellite thermal imaging of the Pacific. The breach window was visible as a heat bloom 200 kilometers off the coast of Japan. Standard Kaiju emergence protocol involved waiting for visual confirmation, then deploying the nearest response team. Torres wasn't waiting. Scramble all available units, she said. I want Gypsy Avengers Saber Athena and Bracer Phoenix in the air in 15 minutes. Guardian Bravo holds reserve position. The tactical coordinator looked up from his station. Marshal, we don't have target classification yet. Standard doctrine says. Standard doctrine assumes we know what we're dealing with. Torres pointed at the waveform display that Gottlieb had forwarded. Whatever opened that window isn't playing by Precursor rules. I want overwhelming force on site before it reaches populated areas. The coordinator nodded and started relaying orders. Gottlieb moved to the analysis station. The thermal bloom was dissipating, but something was rising through the water. Large. Mechanical heat signature, not biological. The profile looked almost familiar, tall, bipedal armored. It resembles a Jaeger, he said. Torres was beside him in 3 steps. Confirm no friendly units in that sector. Confirmed. All PPDC assets accounted for. This is not ours. The satellite feed updated. Higher resolution now. The object breached the surface at 0631 water, streaming off gunmetal plating that caught the early morning light. It stood motionless in the ocean waves, breaking against legs that could have belonged to a Mark VI chassis. But the proportions were wrong. Too narrow through the torso. Too many angles that suggested biological inspiration and rather than human engineering. Camera 3 maximum zoom, Torres ordered. The image sharpened. The thing's head turned slow, deliberate, scanning the horizon with eyes that glowed dull red. Someone in the command center whispered something about Mecha King Ghidorah. Torres silenced them with a look. Size estimate, she asked. Approximately 120 meters, the sensor tech reported. Comparable to our Mark VI platforms. Energy signature is unusual. It's not nuclear. Reading electromagnetic fluctuations consistent with Kaiju neurology. But the source is mechanical. Newt made a sound. Not quite a gasp. More like recognition. Gottlieb glanced at him. What? That thing? Newt pointed at the screen. The entity had shifted its stance, water still cascading from its frame. It's not scanning for threats. It's listening. Listening to what? Breach traffic, Kaiju communication bands, maybe even our monitoring signals. Newt's hand went to his temple. The drumming fingers. The tells. It's orienting to the network. Like it just woke up and needs to figure out where it is. Torres activated the fleet-wide channel. All Jaeger teams, this is command. Target is designated Unknown 1. Approach with extreme caution. Maintain escort formation. Do not engage unless it demonstrates hostile intent. Acknowledge. 3 confirmations came back within seconds. Gypsy Avenger would arrive on site in 12 minutes. Saber Athena in 14. Bracer Phoenix in 16. Unknown 1 remained stationary. The sensor station beeped. Marshal detecting secondary breach fluctuation. Smaller signature. Kaiju classification probable. On screen something else broke the surface. Category 3 judging by mass. One of the standard Precursor designs, armored quadrupedal built for coastal assault. It surfaced 40 kilometers from Unknown 1's position and immediately oriented toward the nearest landmass. Standard behavior. Predictable. Unknown 1 moved, not the slow, cautious movement of a machine testing unfamiliar territory. Fast. Precise. It covered the distance in 18 seconds. Thrusters engaged water displacement visible as twin plumes behind its trajectory. Target is engaging the Kaiju, the tactical coordinator said. Should we? The energy discharge lit up every sensor in the Pacific Theater. Thermal spike registered across 6 city blocks worth of ocean. The satellite feed went white for 3 seconds, then compensated. When the image cleared, the Kaiju was sinking. Massive cavity where its cranial structure had been. Cauterized. Clean. Unknown 1 stood over the corpse, steam rising from something mounted in its jaw assembly. The command center was silent. Torres spoke first. Time to target elimination. 2.1 seconds from weapon discharge to confirmed kill. Kaiju blue readings. Elevated. The entity appears to be extracting something. The sensor tech enhanced the feed. Unknown One had shifted position, lowering closer to the Kaiju's remains. Energy readings spiked again, different pattern this time. Not a weapon discharge, more like a draw. Electromagnetic pulse localized to the corpse. Kaiju blue concentration dropping rapidly. Gottlieb felt his chest tighten. It's feeding. Torres didn't take her eyes off the screen. Update Jaeger teams. Unknown One has demonstrated extreme hostile capability. Revise protocol. Establish quarantine perimeter. Maintain 3-kilometer distance. Prepare for combat engagement on my authorization only. The acknowledgements came back tighter this time. Clipped. Professional soldiers who just watched something kill a Category 3 Kaiju faster than any Jaeger on record. One finished whatever it was doing and straightened. It didn't pursue the corpse as it sank. Didn't demonstrate any further interest. It turned its head that same slow, deliberate scan and looked directly at the satellite. Newt's voice was barely a whisper. It knows we're watching. The triple phase frequency spiked on Gottlieb's monitor. All 3 peaks climbing in perfect synchronization. Torres hit the comm. Code Black, full deployment. I want every available Jaeger in the air within 30 minutes. Science Division, you have tactical priority. I need to know what that thing is before it decides to visit the mainland. Gottlieb was already running the analysis, cross-referencing every known Titan, every documented Precursor creation, every theoretical weapons platform in PPDC archives. Nothing matched. He looked at Newt, who was staring at the waveform display with an expression Gottlieb hadn't seen since the Precursor drift incident. It's not from here, Newt said. Not our world. Not their world, somewhere else. And the Precursors just pulled it through by accident. On screen, Unknown One stood motionless in the Pacific Ocean, watching, listening, learning. The morning shift change happened at 0700. By 0715, every shatter dome in the Pacific Rim had received the alert package. By 0730, the first analysis reports were coming back. None of them had answers. Torres ordered the quarantine zone expanded to 10 kilometers. Ordered continuous monitoring. Ordered contingency plans for evacuation of coastal cities within 500 kilometers of Unknown One's current position. And in the science wing, Gottlieb stared at the triple phase frequency and tried to understand what it meant. When something answered a signal that was never meant for it. The waveform pulsed. Steady, patient, waiting. The quarantine perimeter held for 6 hours. Gypsy Avenger arrived on station at 0743, taking position 3 kilometers northeast of Unknown One. Saber Athena established southwest coverage at 0801. Bracer Phoenix completed the triangle formation at 0817, settling into a hover pattern that kept all weapon systems oriented toward the target. Unknown One didn't react to their presence. It stood in the water waves, breaking against its lower chassis, that dull red glow from its optical sensors, sweeping the horizon in regular intervals. Every 90 seconds, the same scan pattern. Precise. Mechanical. Marshal Torres watched from command the satellite feed, overlaid with tactical readouts from all 3 Jaegers. Sensor profiles. Still reading that hybrid signature, the tech reported. Mechanical framework, but energy distribution matches Kaiju neurology. Whatever's powering it isn't nuclear, isn't plasma, and isn't anything in our database. Gottlieb stood at his station running comparative analyses. The triple phase frequency had stabilized after Unknown One's emergence. Not gone, just steady. Like a carrier wave waiting for transmission. Newt was pacing. Had been since 0700. Back and forth between his workstation and the window overlooking the Pacific. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. You need to sleep, Gottlieb said. Can't. Newt tapped his temple. It's still there. That chord. 3 notes playing at once. It's not getting louder, but it's not fading either. The Precursors are freaking out. Newt stopped pacing, turned to face the main display. Check the breach readings. Tell me I'm wrong. Gottlieb pulled up the data. The primary breach, the one that had been stable for 5 years, was showing fluctuations. Minor but present. Like something was testing it from the other side. They're trying to re-establish control, Gottlieb said. And failing. Newt moved to his own terminal fingers, flying across the keyboard. Look at the handshake attempts. They're pinging Unknown One with the same protocols they use for Kaiju integration. Neural sync commands. Hive mind connection requests. It's all bouncing back. Torres was listening. Dr. Geisler, are you saying the Precursors are attempting to take control of Unknown One? Yeah. And whatever's piloting that thing is telling them to go screw themselves. Newt highlighted a section of the waveform. See this interference? That's not random noise. That's a rejection pulse. Active denial. The implication settled over command like a pressure drop before a storm. Torres opened a channel to the Jaeger teams. All units updated threat assessment. Unknown One may be contested asset between unknown parties. Maintain defensive posture. Do not attempt communication. Crimson Lead's voice came back. Acknowledged. Target remains stationary. No hostile movement. Copy that. Stay sharp. Gottlieb adjusted his monitor, isolating the electromagnetic readings from Unknown One's position. Marshal, I'd like to propose an experiment. Torres turned. What kind of experiment? A limited neural scan. The same technology we use for Jaeger drift synchronization, we could attempt a non-invasive handshake protocol. See if Unknown One responds to standardized communication attempts. You want to try talking to it. I want to determine if it has a cognitive interface we can understand. If it does, we might establish parameters for negotiation. If it doesn't, we'll know we're dealing with something purely autonomous. Torres considered this. Dr. Geisler, your assessment? Newt had stopped pacing again. It'll work, sort of. But Herman, if that thing accepts a handshake, you're opening a door. And we don't know what's on the other side. That's why we proceed cautiously. Low-intensity probe. No sustained connection. Torres made her decision in 4 seconds. Do it. But I want kill switch protocols in place. First sign of hostile intrusion, we sever all connections and pull back to secondary perimeter. Gottlieb nodded. Understood. The neural scan equipment took 20 minutes to configure. They set up a relay through Saber Athena's systems, using the Jaeger as a buffer between the source transmission and PPDC networks. Standard drift handshake protocol, modified for one-way observation. At 0900, they sent the first ping. Unknown One's head shifted. Not much. 5 degrees to the left. Optical sensors brightening from dull red to something closer to arterial. Target is orienting to transmission source, Saber Athena reported. No aggressive posture change. Gottlieb watched the data stream. It's receiving the signal. Processing. I'm reading. He stopped. Torres moved closer. Reading what? A response. Gottlieb's hands were steady on the controls, but his voice had tightened. Unknown One is sending back a handshake acceptance packet. Standard protocol. Perfect syntax. Newt leaned over his shoulder. That's not possible. We invented drift handshake architecture. Nobody outside PPDC knows those protocols. It learned them. Gottlieb highlighted the timestamp. Between signal reception and response 2.8 seconds. It reverse-engineered our communication standard in less than 3 seconds. The connection established. For 5 seconds, everything seemed normal. Data flowed in standard neural handshake patterns, the kind that allowed 2 Jaeger pilots to synchronize their thoughts. Gottlieb monitored the exchange, ready to trigger the kill switch at any anomaly. Then Unknown One sent something back. Not aggression. Not malice. Just observation. Like holding a mirror up to the scanner and reflecting the signal with perfect fidelity. Except it wasn't quite perfect. There were additions. Microscopic packets of code nested inside the response transmission. Elegant. nearly invisible. Gottlieb saw them half a second too late. "Saver connection," he said. "Now." The tech hit the kill switch. The neural link dropped. Saber Athena's systems showed clean disconnection, but Gottlieb was staring at his terminal. At a diagnostic screen that showed PPDC network architecture. At a small subroutine that hadn't been there 3 minutes ago. "We have a problem," he said. Torres was already moving. "Define problem." Unknown One didn't just accept the handshake. It used the connection to insert code into our observation protocols. Nothing aggressive, no immediate threat. Just mapping software. It's learning our network topology. Newt pulled up the same data on his screen. Went pale. It's a Trojan. Low level, dormant. Probably won't activate unless we give it reason to. But Herman, this thing just hacked us through a drift interface. That's not supposed to be possible. "How much of our network did it access?" Torres asked. Gottlieb ran the diagnostic. "Minimal. The connection was too brief for deep penetration. But it established relay nodes, small ones, positioned to observe traffic flow and communication patterns. Can we purge them? Yes, but we'd need to shut down affected systems entirely. Reboot from air-gapped backups. That's," he calculated, "minimum 4 hours of reduced operational capacity, longer if we want to sweep the entire network." Torres activated the emergency channel. "All stations code yellow, potential network intrusion. Switch to manual backup protocols. Tech division begin isolation procedures for primary communication systems." Across the Shatterdome, klaxons began their low pulse. Not the screaming alert of Kaiju attack. The controlled warning of internal compromise. Newt was still staring at the data. "It didn't take control. It could have. We handed it direct access to Saber Athena's neural interface. Could have fried the pilots. Could have turned the Jaeger against us. Instead, it just looked around. Took notes." "Why?" Torres asked. "Because it's not ready yet." Newt met her eyes. "It's learning. Figuring out how we work, how we communicate, how we coordinate. And it's doing it without showing any cards." Gottlieb closed the diagnostic. "Marshal, we need to operate under the assumption that Unknown One now has partial understanding of our command structure. Limited, but present. Anything transmitted on standard channels should be considered potentially observable." Torres nodded. Turned to her communications officer. "Distribute one-time encryption keys to all Jaeger teams. Old-school cipher protocols. Nothing digital until we confirm clean networks." "Yes, ma'am." On the main screen, Unknown One had returned to its original position. Same stance. Same slow scanning pattern. Like nothing had happened. But Gottlieb noticed something new. Every 90 seconds, when the optical sensors completed their sweep, they paused. Just for a fraction of a second. Pointed directly at Saber Athena. "It's watching them," Newt said quietly. "Specifically. It knows which Jaeger made contact." The morning stretched into afternoon. Tech teams worked through the network identifying and quarantining the inserted code. It was clean work, professional grade. No malware, no kill switch. Just observation software designed to sit quietly and map data flow. By 1300 hours, they'd isolated 70% of the intrusion. The remaining 30% was buried deep enough that extraction would require system-wide shutdown. Torres made the call at 13:15. "We maintain current operations, accept the compromise. But nothing sensitive goes through standard channels until we achieve full purge." Gottlieb understood the calculus. Shutting down communications while Unknown One remained active was more dangerous than operating with a passive observer in the network. "Agreed," he said. The Jaeger teams rotated shifts at 1400. Fresh pilots, fresh eyes. Unknown One didn't acknowledge the changeover. It simply stood in the Pacific, that triple-phase frequency humming beneath every sensor reading. Newt had finally stopped pacing. He sat at his workstation, headphones on, listening to the raw signal data. Gottlieb had stopped trying to convince him to rest. At 15:30, Unknown One moved again, not toward the Jaegers, away, southeast. Moving with that same precise efficiency it had demonstrated during the Kaiju kill. "Target is relocating," Saber Athena reported. "Speed approximately 40 knots, heading 135 degrees. Torres pulled up the trajectory map. That course takes it parallel to the coast, maintaining distance from population centers. Jaeger teams maintain pursuit, do not close distance. The three Jaegers adjusted formation, following at 5 kilometers separation. Unknown One traveled for 2 hours, then stopped, waited. At 17:42, sensors detected another breach fluctuation. Another Kaiju. Category 4 this time, larger, more aggressive profile. It surfaced 12 kilometers from Unknown One's position. Unknown One turned to face it. Thruster discharge visible even from satellite altitude. It covered the distance in 31 seconds. The Kaiju didn't have time to orient before Unknown One was on it. No beam weapon this time. Direct physical engagement. Brutal, efficient. The Kaiju managed one strike, a tail sweep that connected with Unknown One's torso plating. Armor deformed, but held. Unknown One's response was surgical, targeting joints, weak points in the Kaiju's natural armor. Disabling strikes designed to immobilize rather than kill immediately. It took 90 seconds. When it was over, the Kaiju was pinned, alive, struggling. Unknown One. One lowered itself to the corpse to be and began the same energy draw Gottlieb had observed during the first kill. "It's harvesting again," the sensor tech said. Kaiju blue concentration dropping. Target appears to be extracting neurochemical energy directly. Gottlieb watched the numbers. This time, Unknown One wasn't just feeding. It was studying. The energy draw pulsed in patterns, not steady extraction, but selective sampling. Testing different neural pathways. Learning. When it finished, the Kaiju was dead, drained. Unknown One stood moved 300 meters northeast and settled into another stationary position. Torres broke the silence. "It's hunting on a schedule. Knows where breach windows will open before we do." "It's reading Precursor traffic," Newt said. "Has to be. It's intercepting their deployment signals and positioning itself at emergence points. Can we do the same? Not without access to the Hive network, which..." Newt gestured at his head. "Not doing that again. But Unknown One doesn't need to drift. It's just listening to the radio. Tuned to a station we can't hear." Gottlieb pulled up the Trojan code analysis, studied the structure. "Marshall, I believe Unknown One's intrusion wasn't just about mapping our network. It was about establishing a baseline, understanding how we process information, how we make decisions." "To what end?" "Unknown." Gottlieb highlighted a section of code. "But this architecture suggests advanced strategic thinking, pattern recognition, predictive modeling. It's not just reacting to threats, it's planning several moves ahead." Torres watched Unknown One on the main screen. Still, silent, waiting for the next breach window with mechanical patience. "Recommendations. We maintain observation," Gottlieb said. "But we accept that every action we take is potentially observable. Every tactic we deploy is being cataloged. Unknown One is treating this engagement as a learning exercise." "And we're the lesson plan?" "Yes." The sun set over the Pacific at 1820. Emergency lighting activated across the Shatter Dome. Standard rotation. Unknown One remained visible on infrared, that constant thermal signature from whatever powered its frame. At 1900, the first reports came in from other monitoring stations. Minor glitches in tactical communication systems. Brief delays in data transmission. Nothing catastrophic. Just enough to notice. Gottlieb checked the network logs. The Trojan code wasn't spreading, but it was active, observing, recording patterns, learning their language. He thought about that handshake, about how quickly Unknown One had understood their protocols. 2.8 seconds to reverse engineer an entire communication architecture, and then the patience to use it passively. No aggression, no takeover attempt, just quiet observation from something that had already demonstrated it could kill Kaiju faster than any Jaeger on record. Newt was right. It wasn't ready yet, but it was getting there, and there was nothing they could do except watch and wait for its next move. The communication delays started small, 0.3 seconds between transmission and receipt. Barely noticeable. Within acceptable parameters for encrypted channels operating under emergency protocols. The duty officer logged it at 2200 hours on day 1. Standard notation. No alarm. By 0200 on day 2, the lag had doubled. Saber Athena reported it first. Command experiencing intermittent signal degradation. Tactical feed showing frame drops every 12 seconds. Torres had the tech division on it within minutes. They found nothing wrong with the hardware. Satellites were functioning normally. Relay stations showed clean diagnostics. But the data was arriving late. Consistently. Like something was reading every packet before allowing it to continue. "It's the Trojan," Gottlieb said. He'd been in command since midnight, running continuous analysis on the inserted code. "It's not just observing anymore, it's actively processing, slowing transmission speed to copy and analyze." "Can we route around it?" Torres asked. "We're trying, but the code has distributed itself across multiple redundant systems. Every time we isolate one instance, 2 more appear in backup channels. It's replicating." Newt looked up from his station. Hadn't slept, eyes bloodshot. "It's learning our network architecture. Every time we shift protocols, it adapts. We're teaching it how to survive our countermeasures." Torres made a decision. "Switch all Jaeger units to manual coordination. Visual signals. Radio silence except for emergency channels. If Unknown One is listening, we go quiet." The order went out at 0230. At 0245, Unknown One moved again. It had remained stationary for 6 hours after the second Kaiju kill. Now it shifted position northwest, away from the quarantine perimeter. Not fleeing, just relocating with that same measured precision. The Jaeger teams followed on visual tracking only. No radio chatter. Hand signals between pilots where possible. Crimson Lead reported via hardline connection that Unknown One's movement pattern suggested deliberate testing. Moving in irregular intervals, changing speed. Watching for pursuit response. "It knows we've gone quiet," Torres said. "And it's checking our reaction time without communications." Gottlieb pulled up the movement data. "Calculating our coordination efficiency. Measuring how much our response capability degrades without digital networks." Can it do that just by watching? It doesn't need to ask questions when it can create the experimental conditions itself. At 0400, Gypsy Avenger experienced a drift desync. Not catastrophic, just a stutter. 0.8 seconds where the neural handshake between pilots felt wrong. Like trying to speak and discovering your mouth was half a second behind your thoughts. The pilots compensated. Reported the incident, continued operations. Braster Phoenix had the same problem at 0420. 0.6 seconds. Same sensation, same recovery. By 0500, all 3 Jaegers on station were logging intermittent desync events. None lasting more than a second. None severe enough to compromise combat effectiveness. But present, consistent, growing. Torres called for immediate diagnostic. The tech teams found the problem in the drift interface subroutines. Not hardware failure, software corruption. Microscopic timing alterations in the synchronization protocols. Like someone had gone through the code and added tiny delays at random intervals. The Trojans reached the drift system's dawn, the lead technician reported. It's not trying to take control, just interfering, making the handshake unreliable. Newt stood up fast enough that his chair rolled back. That's the point. Drift relies on perfect synchronization. Even small delays compound. Pilots start second-guessing the interface. Trust erodes. Performance degrades. How long until it becomes critical? Torres asked. Depends on the pilots. Some teams can compensate longer than others. But eventually, Newt shook his head. Drift only works when both minds trust the connection completely. Unknown One is injecting doubt into the system itself. Gottlieb was already running projections. At current degradation rates, we have approximately 48 hours before drift reliability drops below combat effective thresholds. Torres activated the emergency channel, hardwired no digital routing. All Shatter Domes prepare for air-gapped operations. We're isolating Jaeger drift systems from primary networks within 6 hours. Manual override protocols for all combat deployments. The acknowledgements came back sluggish. Half-second delays. The Trojan spreading through backup systems like water finding cracks. At 0600, Gottlieb proposed the EMP test. If the intrusion is electromagnetic in nature, a controlled pulse might purge the infected systems without permanent damage. We've used similar techniques for Kaiju brain hijack protocols. Torres considered it. Risk assessment, high. EMP strong enough to clear the Trojan could damage our own systems. And there's no guarantee it will work on code this adaptive. But the alternative is complete network shutdown and rebuild. Minimum 72 hours offline. We don't have 72 hours. Torres pulled up the breach monitoring data. Precursor activity is increasing. We're tracking 4 potential emergence windows in the next 24 hours. Unknown One has already demonstrated it can predict these better than we can. If we go dark, we lose what little strategic advantage we have left. Gottlieb nodded. Then we test the EMP on a limited scale. Isolated system. Observe Unknown One's response. Do it. But I want contingencies for every failure mode. They set up the test at 0730. Selected a non-critical monitoring station satellite relay system, backup redundant, far from primary operations. Gottlieb configured the pulse for minimum strength, maximum precision. Enough to disrupt electromagnetic processes without causing permanent damage. At 0800, they fired the pulse. The monitoring station went offline for 2.3 seconds. Systems rebooted clean. Diagnostics showed zero trace of Trojan code. Complete success. Unknown One's optical sensors brightened to full red. Target is reacting. Saber Athena reported via hardline. No movement, but energy signature just spiked. Reading increased activity across all observed systems. Gottlieb watched the telemetry. Unknown One wasn't attacking. Wasn't even postured aggressively. It was just different, alert. Like something sleeping had opened one eye. Scan for Trojan code in affected systems, he said. The tech ran the diagnostic. Came back 30 seconds later. Sir, the code is back. Different structure. Rewritten. It adapted to the EMP signature and rebuilt itself using alternate electromagnetic bands. Newt laughed, high and sharp. Stress bleeding through. We just taught it how to survive an EMP in 2 seconds. It saw the pulse analyze the effect and engineered a countermeasure before our systems finished rebooting. Torres's expression didn't change. Time estimate for adaptation, 2.3 seconds, Gottlieb said. Exactly as long as our systems were offline. It used our recovery time as a window to rewrite itself. Can we pulse again? Force it to adapt until it runs out of options? That assumes it has limits. Gottlieb pulled up the new code structure. More elegant than the first version. Tighter, more efficient. Every adaptation makes it stronger. We're not degrading its capabilities. We're training it. Torres was quiet for 5 seconds. Then she opened the command channel. All stations cancel EMP protocols. We don't use electromagnetic countermeasures against Unknown One unless directly engaged. That's an order. The acknowledgements came back. Slower now. The Trojan was in everything. At 0900, Guardian Bravo rotated onto station. Fresh pilots. Full diagnostics before deployment. They reported drift synchronization at 93% lower than standard, but acceptable for combat operations. By 0930, they were at 87%. By 01000, 81. The pilots compensated. Shifted their synchronization technique. Found workarounds for the timing delays. Professional soldiers adapting to compromised equipment. But Gottlieb could see it in the data. Every compensation created new patterns, new behaviors. And Unknown One was watching. At 1100, Newt spoke up. It's not trying to destroy us. Torres turned. Explain. The Trojan, the drift interference, the EMP adaptation. None of it is aggressive. It's all research. Newt gestured at his monitor. If Unknown One wanted to crash our systems, it could. We handed it access. Instead, it's cataloging our responses, learning how we adapt to threats, building a database of human tactical behavior. For what purpose? That's the question, isn't it? Newt met her eyes. Because right now, we're not its enemy. We're its case study. Gottlieb understood. It's preparing for something. Unknown One didn't come through that breach by accident. The Precursors tried to control it and failed. Now it's establishing itself, learning the rules of this world, and we're teaching it everything it needs to know. Torres looked at the main screen. Unknown One stood in the Pacific surrounded by 3 Jaegers it could probably destroy individually, but hadn't. Infected with observation code that could have been weaponized, but wasn't. Learning from every move PPDC made. Marshal, the sensor tech called out. Detecting new breach activity. Category 5 signature. Emergence in 30 minutes. Coordinates. The tech paused. Coordinates match Unknown One's current heading from 6 hours ago. Torres pulled up the projection. Unknown One had been moving toward this position since 0400, 4 hours before the breach window opened. 4 hours before PPDC sensors detected it. It knew, she said. Gottlieb nodded. It's reading Precursor deployment schedules with greater accuracy than our entire monitoring network. And it positioned itself perfectly to intercept. On screen, Unknown One shifted stance. Small adjustment, preparing. Newt was watching the triple phase frequency. All 3 peaks climbing. It's not just listening anymore. It's talking back. To the Precursors, to the Kaiju, maybe to other things. And we don't even know what language it's speaking. The 30-minute countdown began. Torres ordered the Jaeger teams to maintain distance. Observe only. Do not engage unless Unknown One moved toward populated areas. They watched. At 11:29, the breach window opened. The largest surge PPDC had recorded in 3 years. Category 5, designation confirmed. Mass readings suggested something from the deep antiverse, old, armored, built for prolonged combat. The Kaiju surfaced at 11:31. Unknown One moved at 11:32. This time, it didn't wait for the Kaiju to orient. Engaged immediately. Thrusters at full burn. That beam weapon, the one that had killed a Category 3 in 2 seconds, fired continuously. Sustained discharge. Carving through armor plate that should have been impenetrable. The Kaiju fought back. Managed to land 3 solid hits. Unknown One's chassis took visible damage. Armor cracked. 1 thruster sputtered. But it didn't stop. Didn't slow. Just adjusted tactics. Switched from beam weapon to physical strikes. Targeting damaged sections, exploiting weaknesses its weapon had created. The fight lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, the Category 5 was sinking. Unknown One stood over it, that same energy draw beginning. But this time Gottlieb noticed something different. The extraction pattern has changed, he said. It's not just taking Kaiju blue. It's selecting specific neural pathways. Copying combat data, memory engrams. It's downloading the Kaiju's battle experience. Torres watched the energy readings spike and fall. How much? Unknown. But that Kaiju had probably been through dozens of fights. Against Jaegers, against other Kaiju, against Precursor control protocols. Unknown One just acquired all of that tactical knowledge. Newt pulled up the drift desync logs. And while we were watching the big show, the Trojan spread to 14 more systems, including weapons targeting, fire control, emergency protocols. It distracted us, Torres said. Yeah. Newt highlighted the timeline. Spectacle out there, infiltration in here. We're watching it hunt while it's actually dissecting our entire command structure. Gottlieb ran the projections again. At current rates, Unknown One will have comprehensive mapping of PPDC operations within 18 hours. It will know our response times, our weapon ranges, our coordination patterns. Everything. Torres opened the command channel. All Shatterdomes code yellow elevation. Begin full air gap protocols. I want every critical system isolated from networked operations. If it can't transmit, the Trojan can't reach it. The acknowledgments were immediate. Professional. But Gottlieb could hear the strain. PPDC had spent 5 years building an integrated defense network. Now they were deliberately dismantling it because something had learned to use it better than they could. Unknown One finished its extraction. Rose from the Category 5's corpse. That damaged thruster was already repairing nanoscale reconstruction visible on thermal imaging. It turned toward the Jaeger formation. Didn't approach, just looked. All 3 peaks of the triple phase frequency pulsed once. Synchronized. Deliberate. Then, Unknown One dove beneath the surface and vanished from sensors. The Jaeger team swept the area for 2 hours. Found nothing. Unknown One had learned stealth. Torres stood in command, watching empty ocean on the main display. Recommendations. Gottlieb closed his analysis. We operate under the assumption that Unknown One has complete understanding of our tactical framework. Every weapon system, every coordination protocol, every drift synchronization technique. It's been watching us for 36 hours, and we've taught it everything. Can we still win if it turns hostile? That depends on whether we can adapt faster than it can predict, and based on current evidence. Gottlieb paused. Chose honesty. No, we cannot. Newt was staring at the frequency display. The triple phase signature was gone, not dormant, not reduced, just absent. Like Unknown One had learned to hide even that. It's not going to turn hostile, Newt said quietly. Not yet. Because it's still learning, and we're still teaching. The question is, what happens when it decides the lesson's over? Torres pulled up the global threat map. 4 more breach windows projected in the next 12 hours. Category ratings from 3 to 5. Standard precursor escalation pattern, except now there was something else in the Pacific. Something that could predict breach windows better than humanity. Could kill Category 5s in 4 minutes. Could infiltrate PPDC networks and adapt to countermeasures in real time. Something that had been in this world for 36 hours and already understood it better than the people who'd been fighting to save it for a decade. All stations, Torres said. Maintain full alert. Unknown One is no longer just a threat. It's a tactical intelligence actively studying our operations. Every engagement is a learning opportunity for it. Every response we make is data. Proceed accordingly. She closed the channel. In the science wing, Gottlieb stared at his empty monitor and thought about that EMP test. 2.3 seconds to adapt. Perfect counter-engineering, like it had been waiting for them to try exactly that. Teaching it to survive, teaching it to win. And the worst part was knowing they couldn't stop. Because the alternative to fighting Unknown One with compromised systems was not fighting at all. The Trojan code pulsed through PPDC networks. Silent, patient, recording everything. Somewhere in the Pacific, Unknown One was learning to speak their language better than they could themselves, and there was nothing they could do except wait for it to use that knowledge. The breach went critical at 1400 hours on day 3. Not an expansion, not a surge. Something worse. The primary portal stable for 5 years, predictable in its rhythms, began oscillating. Frequency peaks spiking and crashing in patterns that had no precedent in PPDC records. Gottlieb was running the analysis before the alarms finished their first cycle. The precursors are attempting something. The waveform architecture suggests active manipulation of the breach aperture itself. Torres moved to his station. Define manipulation. They're trying to force synchronization, broadcasting control signals at maximum intensity, like they're searching for something specific on this side. He highlighted a section of the data, and they're not being subtle about it. Newt had his headphones on, listening to the raw signal. He yanked them off after 5 seconds, hands shaking. They're screaming. I've never heard them like this. Desperate, angry. They lost something and they want it back. Unknown One, Torres said. Has to be. They pulled it through by accident, and now they're trying to reclaim it. But they can't find it. Newt pulled up the triple-phase frequency display. Empty, no signal. Unknown One had been dark for 16 hours. It's blocking them, actively refusing connection. The breach fluctuations intensified. On satellite feed, the ocean above the portal was churning. Not from emerging kaiju, from the instability itself. Energy bleeding through dimensional barriers. At 1415, the precursors made their move. The Hive network pulse hit like a tidal wave. Every monitoring station in the Pacific registered it simultaneously. Not a kaiju deployment signal, not a dimensional breach, something else entirely. A command protocol, the same kind the precursors had used to hijack drone Jaegers during the uprising. Targeted, specific, searching. Newt screamed, not loud. Just a sharp intake of breath, and then he was on the floor, hands clamped over his ears, curled tight. Gottlieb was beside him in seconds, calling for medical. Don't, Newt managed. It's not me they want. It's... He looked up, eyes wide. They're pinging the network, looking for the triple-phase response. They think Unknown One is integrated into our systems. Torres was already on comms. All Jaeger team status report. Any anomalous signals, unauthorized command inputs. The responses came back clean. No hijack attempts. No system intrusion beyond the existing Trojan code. But Unknown One surfaced, 12 kilometers from its last known position. Rising from the Pacific like it had been summoned. Optical sensors blazing full red. Every thruster active. Energy signatures spiking across all monitoring bands. Target has emerged, Gypsy Avenger reported. Reading massive electromagnetic discharge. Unknown One is... The pilot paused. It's broadcasting, some kind of response signal, directed at the breach. Gottlieb pulled up the frequency analysis. There it was. The triple-phase signature. Not hidden anymore. Active, aggressive, and underneath it something else. A fourth harmonic. Woven through the original 3 like a blade through silk. It's rejecting them, he said. The precursors tried to establish hive connection, and Unknown One is sending back denial. Complete refusal. Newt was still on the floor, but his hands had dropped from his ears. It's not just refusing. It's... He struggled for the word. Counterpulsing. Every command the precursors send, Unknown One sends back interference. Corrupting their signals. Turning their own control protocols against them. The breach oscillations became chaotic, wild. Torres watched the satellite feed as the dimensional aperture flickered like a dying star. What happens if the precursors lose control of the breach? Unknown. Gottlieb said. "This has never happened. The Hive network has always maintained absolute control of portal infrastructure, but Unknown One is..." The breach vomited out 6 Kaiju simultaneously. Not a deployment. An expulsion. Category ratings from 2 to 4. Different morphologies. Different tactical profiles. Launched from the antiverse like projectiles from a failing system. They surfaced in a rough cluster, disoriented, lacking the usual coordinated behavior of Precursor-controlled assets. Unknown. One moved before the last Kaiju cleared the water. No hesitation, no strategic positioning, just pure predatory response. It hit the nearest Category 4 with enough force to register on seismic monitors 200 kilometers away. The Kaiju barely managed a defensive posture before Unknown One tore through its armor plating. The other 5 scattered. Survival instinct, overriding whatever commands the Precursors were trying to transmit. "Jaeger teams," Torres ordered. "Engage dispersing Kaiju. Priority is coastal defense. Leave Unknown One to its target." Gypsy Avenger and Saber. Athena broke formation, moving to intercept the fleeing Category 3s. Bracer Phoenix held position, maintaining observation on Unknown One. The fight lasted 90 seconds. Unknown One didn't just kill. It systematically disabled each Kaiju in sequence. Targeted strikes to neural clusters. Precision work. By the time Gypsy Avenger reached the first Category 3, Unknown One had already killed 2 and was moving on the 3rd. "It's not feeding," Bracer Phoenix reported. "Unknown One is eliminating targets and moving on. No energy extraction, just termination." Gottlieb watched the pattern. "It's making a point. Demonstrating capability. Showing the Precursors what happens when they attempt control." The 6th Kaiju died at 1423. One stood in the center of 6 corpses, surrounded by Kaiju blue spreading across the water's surface. Energy signature still elevated, still broadcasting that rejection pulse toward the breach. The Precursor response was immediate. The Hive network attempted connection again. Stronger, more focused. Like they were willing to burn out the breach itself to force Unknown One into compliance. Newt made a sound. Not pain, recognition. They're offering integration, not control, partnership, access to the hive mind in exchange for... He stopped. Listened to something the rest of them couldn't hear. In exchange for cooperation against humanity. Torres went very still. Can Unknown One accept? Technically, maybe. The triple-phase architecture could interface with Hive protocols, but Unknown One's broadcast shifted. The 4th harmonic intensified, became dominant. And underneath it, Gottlieb detected something that made his hands go cold. Structure, intentionality, language. Unknown One was speaking, not in words, not in any human framework, but in pure electromagnetic syntax, transmitting meaning directly into the Precursor control network. And whatever it said, the Precursors didn't like it. The breach destabilized completely. Oscillations became arrhythmic. Portal aperture expanding and contracting like a dying heart. Energy readings spiking into ranges that shouldn't be possible for stable dimensional barriers. "Breach integrity is failing," the sensor tech called out. "If this continues, we could see catastrophic collapse. Portal could seal permanently or..." He paused. "Or tear wide enough to flood this hemisphere with Kaiju." Torres opened emergency channels. "All Pacific Rim stations prepare for mass emergence scenario. I want every available Jaeger deployed within 30 minutes. The acknowledgements came back. Clipped. Professional. But Gottlieb could hear the tension. PPDC had contingencies for breach expansion. For Category 6 emergence. For coordinated Kaiju waves. They had no contingency for the portal itself becoming a weapon. At 1430, the Precursors tried one final gambit. 3 breach windows opened simultaneously. Secondary portals, smaller, unstable. positioned in a triangle around Unknown One's location. 3 Category 4s emerged in perfect synchronization, not attacking humanity, attacking Unknown One. They've weaponized their own assets against it, Newt said. Complete override. Those Kaiju aren't following tactical protocols. They're on suicide mission. Unknown One responded with calculated brutality. Engaged the nearest Kaiju while tracking the other 2. Used the first as a shield against the second's acid spray. Redirected the third's charge into the second's flank. Turned their coordination against them. The Jaeger teams held position watching. This wasn't their fight. This was something older. Something that had nothing to do with humanity, except that it was happening in their ocean. The 3 Kaiju lasted 2 minutes. When it was over, Unknown One stood alone. 9 Kaiju corpses sinking around it. Energy signature diminished but stable. And that broadcast, that 4th harmonic rejection pulse, still transmitting. The breach collapsed to minimum aperture. Not sealed, not destroyed, just reduced. Like the precursors had pulled back, retreated. Gottlieb ran the analysis. The Hive network traffic showed massive reorganization. Confusion. The kind of chaos that happened when a distributed intelligence encountered something it couldn't categorize. They failed, Torres said. Worse, Newt replied. They tried to assimilate it, and Unknown One corrupted their signal. Now they know they can't control it. Can't reason with it. Can't even communicate on terms they understand. He gestured at the frequency display. And it just killed 9 of their assets like it was swatting insects. Unknown. One turned. Not toward the Jaegers, toward the diminished breach. That slow, deliberate rotation. Optical sensors locked on the portal aperture. Then it broadcast one more pulse. Shorter. Sharper. Unmistakable in its meaning, even to human observers. Warning! The breach went completely dark. Signal traffic ceased. For the first time in recorded history, the precursors went silent. Torres opened the command channel. All teams maintain defensive positions. Unknown One has demonstrated non-aggression toward PPDC assets. Our priority is monitoring and preparing for potential precursor retaliation, Gypsy Avenger acknowledged. Command requesting clarification. Are we protecting Unknown One or containing it? Torres was quiet for 3 seconds. Unknown. Continue observation. Gottlieb watched Unknown One on the main display. It remained stationary. Not feeding, not harvesting. Just standing among the corpses it had created. Making a point to something in another dimension. It rejected partnership with beings who can terraform worlds, he said. Refused integration with a hive mind that has conquered multiple realities. And it did so violently enough to make them retreat. What does that tell us? Torres asked. That Unknown One isn't here to cooperate with anyone. Gottlieb pulled up the Trojan infiltration data. Still spreading, still adapting, still learning. The precursors wanted to control it. We want to contain it. Unknown One appears to want neither. Newt was staring at the triple phase frequency. The 4th harmonic was fading now, returning to the original 3-part structure. But it was different. Stronger, more coherent. It learned something, Newt said. From the precursors, from their hive network. It got inside their communication protocols and took something. Information, architecture, strategy. He looked at Torres. We've been watching it study us for 3 days. But we just watched it infiltrate an intelligence that spans dimensions. And it did it in 20 minutes. Torres pulled up the global threat map. The breach was minimal. But there were reports coming in from other monitoring stations. Strange signals, unusual electromagnetic patterns, like something was testing dimensional barriers at multiple points simultaneously. It's expanding its understanding, Gottlieb said. Not just of this world, of how to access others. The precursors tried to control Unknown One, and instead gave it a map of their entire infrastructure. At 1500 hours, Unknown One submerged again. Sensors tracked it for 6 minutes before it learned to mask even thermal signatures. Then it was gone, somewhere in the Pacific. Carrying knowledge of both human tactical doctrine and precursor dimensional technology, Torres stood in command and made the call she'd been avoiding for 3 days. All Shatterdome's code read elevation. Unknown One is now classified as existential threat. It has demonstrated ability to adapt to both human and precursor control systems, has knowledge of our complete tactical framework and partial access to antiverse technology. All available resources are authorized for containment protocols. The responses came back. Acknowledgement, mobilization, 60 Jaegers worldwide beginning deployment cycles. But Gottlieb was watching the infiltration data. The Trojan code had evolved again, more elegant, more efficient, incorporating structures that looked almost like precursor hive architecture. Unknown One had been learning from 2 sources simultaneously, and they had no idea what it planned to do with that knowledge. In the science wing, Newt pulled up an old file. Precursor communication logs from the uprising. The pattern matching was obvious. Unknown One's 4th harmonic used similar structures, but reversed, inverted. Not communication, domination. He sent the file to Torres with a single line of commentary. It's not trying to talk. It's trying to take over. And somewhere in the Pacific, Unknown One was silent, learning, preparing. Tokyo's early warning system activated at 0300 on day 4. Not a drill. 3 breach windows opening in coordinated sequence, category ratings, 4, 4, and 5. Emergence pattern suggested deliberate tactical deployment. The precursors were done retreating. Marshal Torres had 60 seconds to make the call. Deploy all available units. Tokyo defense grid goes active now. I want Saber Athena Bracer Phoenix and Guardian Bravo on intercept vectors within 10 minutes. Gypsy Avenger holds reserve position. The Shatter Dome erupted into controlled chaos. Pilots sprinting to deployment bays. Tech crews running final diagnostics on systems they knew were compromised. The Trojan code was in everything now. Drift synchronization was running at 73% baseline. They were going into combat with degraded equipment against Category 5s. An Unknown One was somewhere in the Pacific, silent, watching. The first Kaiju designated Reijin surfaced 8 kilometers off Tokyo Bay at 0314. Quadrupedal, heavily armored, acid glands visible along its dorsal ridge. It oriented toward the city and began its approach. Saber Athena intercepted at 0319. The Jaeger came in fast, plasma cannon already charged. Crimson Lead's voice was steady on the comm. Command engaging Raijin, targeting forward limbs. The first shot connected. Cauterized a section of Raijin's shoulder plating. The Kaiju bellowed and shifted tactics, spraying acid in a wide arc. Saber Athena dodged left, compensated for drift lag, returned fire. Standard engagement. Textbook execution. Then the second Kaiju emerged, Hakuja. Category 4. Serpentine body structure, built for constriction and close quarters combat. It surfaced behind Saber Athena's position and moved with speed that contradicted its mass. Second target emerging, Saber Athena reported. Repositioning for. The drift desync hit mid-sentence, 1.2 seconds. Long enough for Hakuja to close distance. Long enough for the constriction strike to land before the pilots could coordinate evasive action. Saber Athena went down hard. Hakuja wrapped around the Jaeger's torso, squeezing, alarm screaming. Structural integrity warnings cascading across every system. Bracer Phoenix was still 90 seconds out. Crimson Lead fought through the desync. Managed to activate emergency thrusters. Partial burn. Enough to destabilize Hakuja's grip. The Kaiju adjusted, tightened, and Saber Athena's right arm buckled, experiencing critical damage. Crimson Lead transmitted, voice tight, professional even as their Jaeger was being crushed. Hull breach in sectors 4 and 7. Drift sink is... The third Kaiju surfaced, Shrikethorn, Category 5, the largest. Built like a mobile fortress with blade-like protrusions covering its body. It emerged directly between Tokyo and the fighting Jaegers, and it didn't attack. It stood, watching, like it was waiting for something. Torres saw it immediately. It's a setup. The Precursors are creating a kill zone. Guardian Bravo, break off approach. Do not enter the triangle. But Guardian Bravo was already committed. Already in motion. The pilots acknowledged the order, but momentum carried them forward into the space between 3 Kaiju that had just stopped behaving like animals. That's when Unknown One arrived. No warning. No sensor detection. It simply rose from the water 200 meters from Shrikethorn's position. Emerged at full combat readiness. Every system active. Optical sensors blazing. And it ignored the Jaegers completely. Unknown One hit Shrikethorn like a precision weapon. Proton beam firing continuously. Not wild discharge. Surgical strikes. Targeting the Category 5's blade protrusions. Disabling offensive capabilities before engaging physically. Shrikethorn fought back. Managed one solid strike. Unknown One's chest plating cracked. Visible damage. Real damage. It didn't slow down. Gottlieb was watching from command, pulling data as fast as sensors could deliver it. Unknown One is prioritizing Kaiju elimination. He stopped. Recalculated. It's positioning itself between the Kaiju and the city. Torres didn't have time to process that. Guardian Bravo assist Saber Athena. Get them clear of Hakuja. Bracer Phoenix engage Raijin before it reaches the harbor. The acknowledgements came back. But the drift lag was getting worse. Every Jaeger reporting sync degradation. Combat effectiveness dropping in real time. Hakuja released Saber Athena and turned toward Guardian Bravo. The fresher target. Guardian Bravo's pilots, compensated for desync, brought weapons to bear, fired. Missed. 0.4 seconds of lag. Enough to matter. Hakuja's tail whip connected with Guardian Bravo's knee joint. The Jaeger stumbled. Caught itself. Returned fire. Hit this time. But the damage was done. Guardian Bravo's mobility was compromised, and Hakuja was already repositioning for another strike. Unknown One killed Shrikethorn at 0328. 14 minutes of sustained combat. Brutal. Efficient. When it was over, the Category 5 was sinking with a cavity where its neural cluster had been. Unknown One stood over the corpse, damaged but functional, and turned toward the remaining Kaiju. It moved toward Hakuja. Guardian Bravo was in the way. Unknown One is approaching our position. Guardian lead transmitted. Request instructions. Torres had 2 seconds to decide. Hold position. Do not engage Unknown One unless it demonstrates hostile intent toward PPDC assets. Unknown One passed within 50 meters of Guardian Bravo. Didn't slow, didn't acknowledge. Just moved past like the Jaeger was irrelevant architecture. It hit Hakuja from behind. The Serpentine Kaiju never had a chance to reorient. Unknown One's strikes were targeted. Precise. Spinal segments. Neural pathways. 40 seconds of systematic dismantling. Hakuja died at 0331. Unknown One didn't feed. Didn't harvest. Just turned toward Raijin. Bracer Phoenix was engaging the Category 4 when Unknown One arrived. The Jaeger had managed to disable one of Raijin's legs, but was taking acid damage. Hull integrity at 60%. Pilots compensating for drift desync and corrosive compromise. Unknown. One ended the fight in 18 seconds. Single proton beam discharge. Sustained burn. Raijin's head vaporized. The Kaiju collapsed mid-charge. Then Unknown One stopped. Stood among 3 Kaiju corpses, surrounded by Kaiju blue spreading across the water. Energy signature elevated but stable. damaged chassis already beginning nanoscale repairs, and it turned to face the Jaegers, all three still functional units. Saber Athena crippled but operational. Guardian Bravo mobility compromised. Bracer Phoenix acid damaged. All of them running on degraded drift synchronization. Unknown One looked at them, not threatening, not aggressive, just observing. Like it was cataloging their current combat effectiveness, measuring capabilities, recording damage patterns. Then it broadcast, not the triple phase frequency, something new. A pulse that hit every sensor array simultaneously. Every monitoring station, every emergency broadcast system in Tokyo. Gottlieb pulled the analysis. It's transmitting on civilian emergency bands. Unknown One just sent a signal that reached 40 million people. What did it say? Torres asked. Nothing. Just a carrier wave. Proof of reach. Demonstrating it can access any communication infrastructure it wants. Newt was staring at his terminal. It's showing us. Not the precursors. Us. It just protected Tokyo from 3 Kaiju, and now it's making sure we know it could broadcast anything it wants to our entire population. Unknown One held position for 30 seconds. Then it turned back toward the ocean and dove. The water closed over it. Sensors tried to track. Failed. Unknown One had learned complete stealth. Torres opened the command channel. All Jaeger teams damage reports. Saber Athena responded first. Right arm non-functional. Hull breaches sealed but not repaired. Drift sync at 61%. We can fight, but we're compromised. Guardian Bravo. Left knee joint damaged. Mobility reduced 40%. Sync at 68%. Combat capable with restrictions. Bracer Phoenix. Acid damage to torso plating. Partial hull compromise. Sync at 70%. Functional but degraded. 3 Jaegers. All damaged. All running on failing synchronization. And they hadn't fired a single effective shot against the Kaiju that Unknown One had eliminated in minutes. Begin retrieval operations, Torres ordered. Get those teams back to Shatterdome for emergency repairs. Gypsy Avenger, you're now primary response unit. The acknowledgements came back. Tired, professional. But Gottlieb could hear what they weren't saying. They'd just watched Unknown One do their job better than they could. At 0400, the Precursors opened another breach window, larger. Category 5 rating. Emergence point directly over the site where Unknown One had killed Shrikethorn. The Kaiju that surfaced was different. Mega Kaiju classification. Fusion of 3 separate organisms. Raijin Hakuja Shrikethorn genetic markers all present. The Precursors had taken their dead and rebuilt them into something new. It was massive, easily matching Unknown One's size. And it was smart. Combat data from all 3 previous Kaiju integrated into a single tactical framework. Gypsy Avenger deployed at 0406. Jake Pentecost's voice came through steady. Command, we have visual on Mega Kaiju. Target is... He paused. It's not moving toward the city. It's holding position. Like it's waiting. Torres pulled up the tactical display. Waiting for Unknown One. Yes, ma'am. This isn't a city attack. This is a direct challenge. Unknown One surfaced at 0412. Rose from the ocean 200 meters from Mega Kaiju's position. No hesitation. No positioning phase. Just immediate engagement. The fight was different this time. Mega Kaiju had Raijin's armor, Hakuja's speed, Shrikethorn's blade protrusions, and combat experience from all 3 previous encounters. It adapted to Unknown One's tactics. Blocked the proton beam with armored sections, dodged the precision strikes, countered with coordinated attacks that used all 3 Kaiju's strengths simultaneously. Unknown One took damage. Real damage. Chest plating cracked further. Left arm actuator compromised. Thruster malfunction. But it didn't retreat. Gottlieb was watching the energy signatures. Unknown One's power output is fluctuating. It's sustaining damage faster than repair systems can compensate. Mega Kaiju is designed specifically to counter its capabilities. The fight continued. 3 minutes, 5, 7. Unknown One was losing. Not quickly, not dramatically, but measurably. Combat effectiveness degrading. Damage accumulating. Mega Kaiju was built from the tactical data of everything Unknown One had killed so far. Every weakness it had demonstrated. Every pattern it had used. The Precursors had learned. At 0420, Mega Kaiju landed a strike that sent Unknown One to one knee. Not catastrophic, but significant. First time PPDC had seen Unknown One forced into a defensive posture. Gypsy Avenger was holding position 3 kilometers out. Jake's voice came through. Command Unknown One is compromised. Request permission to engage Mega Kaiju. Torres had 5 seconds to make the call. They'd just watched Unknown One protect Tokyo from 3 Kaiju without being asked. Watched it demonstrate it could access civilian communication networks. Watched it choose not to attack PPDC assets when it had every opportunity. And now it was losing against something the Precursors had built specifically to kill it. Negative, reshape, Torres said. Maintain observation. This is their fight. Jake acknowledged. Didn't argue. But Gottlieb could hear the tension. Unknown One rose from its knee, damaged, compromised, facing an opponent designed to counter everything it had done. And it changed tactics. No more precision strikes. No more surgical targeting. Unknown One grabbed Mega Kaiju in a grapple. Physical, direct. Close enough that the Kaiju couldn't use its full arsenal. Gottlieb saw what was happening. It's not trying to kill Mega Kaiju anymore. It's restraining it. Holding it in place for the energy draw began. Not extraction, invasion. Unknown One was forcing an electromagnetic connection into Mega Kaiju's neural structure. Not to harvest, to overload. Mega Kaiju thrashed, fought, but Unknown One held the grapple, sustained the connection, pouring energy into the Kaiju's nervous system faster than it could process. The fight lasted another 90 seconds. When it ended, Mega Kaiju was convulsing. Neural cascade failure. The fusion that made it strong was now its weakness. 3 separate nervous systems trying to process the same overload simultaneously. Unknown One released the grapple, stepped back, watched Mega Kaiju collapse. Watched the neurological shutdown ripple through its massive frame. Then it began feeding, but this time was different. Unknown One wasn't just harvesting Kaiju Blue, it was downloading, pulling combat data, tactical information, everything the Precursors had encoded into Mega Kaiju's structure. The Precursors had given it their best weapon. Unknown One was taking everything that weapon knew. Gottlieb pulled the analysis. Energy extraction pattern shows data transfer. Unknown One is copying Mega Kaiju's combat experience, learning from the thing designed to kill it. Newt was watching the Trojan code activity. It had spiked during the fight, spread to 6 more systems. It distracted us again. Big spectacle outside while infiltration continued inside. We're down to 42% uncompromised network capacity. Torres activated the emergency channel. All stations, Unknown One has demonstrated ability to adapt to Precursor counter tactics. It's now extracted data from a Kaiju designed specifically to neutralize its capabilities. Threat assessment is, the sensor station alarm cut her off. Multiple breach signatures, 4 windows, category 4 and 5 ratings, emergence in 15 minutes, locations. The tech pulled up the map. Tokyo, Hong Kong, Sydney, San Francisco, simultaneous global deployment. The Precursors weren't retreating anymore. They were escalating. Unknown One finished its extraction. Rose from Mega Kaiju's corpse. Energy signature stabilized. Damage still present but no longer critical. And it broadcast again. Same civilian emergency bands. Same carrier wave. But this time there was structure underneath. Not language, not communication, just a repeating pulse. Mathematical, precise. Coordinates. Gottlieb ran the decode. It's transmitting location data for all 4 breach windows. Unknown One just told us where the Kaiju are going to emerge before they surface. How does it know? Torres asked. It's reading Precursor deployment signals, has been since it rejected their control, and now it's... Newt stopped, started again. It's sharing intelligence with us, telling us where to position forces. Unknown One didn't wait for PPDC response. It moved toward the nearest emergence point. Hong Kong, 3,000 kilometers. It would take a Jaeger 12 hours to cover that distance. Unknown One's thrusters burned at full power. Sustained acceleration, combat speed. It would be there in 90 minutes. Torres opened the global channel. All Shatterdomes, we have confirmed breach emergence coordinates provided by Unknown One. Deploy forces to specified locations. Treat Unknown One as... She paused, chose carefully. Treat Unknown One as unaligned combatant, not hostile to PPDC unless provoked. Primary threat remains Kaiju. The acknowledgements came back from around the world. Confusion, questions. But compliance. Gottlieb was staring at the tactical display. Unknown One moving toward Hong Kong. 4 breach windows opening, the Precursors launching a coordinated global assault. An Unknown One was choosing to fight them, not humanity, not PPDC, the Precursors. Why? Torres asked quietly. Unknown, Gottlieb said. But it's been learning our tactical framework for 4 days. Studying how we coordinate, how we defend, how we make decisions under pressure. And now it's... Newt finished the thought. Participating. It's not helping us. It's just killing Kaiju. But the effect is the same. We get protected. Precursors get countered. And Unknown One gets more data. Torres pulled up the Trojan infiltration status. 58% of PPDC networks compromised. Drift synchronization degrading hourly. Combat effectiveness reduced across all units. They were losing the ability to fight. An Unknown One was fighting for them, not because it cared. Not because it chose them over the Precursors, but because fighting Kaiju gave it what it wanted. Combat data, tactical experience, knowledge. They were still the case study. Just now they were a case study with shared enemies. At 0500, Unknown One reached Hong Kong, engaged 2 Category 4s before they made landfall. Killed both in 6 minutes. Harvested combat data. Broadcast emergence coordinates for the next wave. The pattern was clear. Unknown One was hunting, learning, expanding capabilities. And PPDC was either its unwilling partner or its convenient shield. Nobody knew which. In Tokyo, damaged Jaegers limped back to Shatterdome. Emergency repairs beginning. Pilots exhausted. Systems failing. Torres stood in command and watched Unknown One's signal move across the Pacific. Faster than any Jaeger. More efficient than any defense grid. Winning a war that humanity was losing. And every victory made it stronger. The global assault lasted 14 hours. Hong Kong fell first. Unknown One arrived before the Category 4s made landfall. Eliminated both targets in 11 minutes. No PPDC support required. The local Jaeger team, Crimson Typhoon Replacement Unit, maintained 3-kilometer distance and watched. Sydney was different. The Category 5 that emerged had acid capabilities and EMP discharge. Unknown One engaged at 0800 local time. The fight lasted 19 minutes. Unknown One sustained visible damage. Chest plating fractures, thruster malfunction, but it adapted mid-combat. Shifted tactics, won. San Francisco never saw combat. The breach window collapsed before emergence. Precursor deployment failure, first time in recorded history. Gottlieb noted the pattern. The Precursors are having difficulty maintaining portal stability. Unknown One's rejection pulse during the assimilation attempt may have damaged their dimensional control infrastructure. Newt was watching the Hive network traffic. Chaotic, disorganized. They're panicking. burning through kaiju faster than they can grow them. Every asset they deploy, Unknown One kills. Every tactical adaptation they try, it counters. They're losing. Torres stood in command, tracking Unknown One's movements across the global display. 15 kaiju eliminated in 14 hours. No losses, no retreats, just systematic extermination. "And we're watching," she said quietly. At 1600 hours, Unknown One returned to the Pacific, submerged, vanished from sensors. The Trojan code activity spiked immediately. Every system, every network, every air-gapped backup. The infiltration that had been gradual for 4 days suddenly accelerated. Like Unknown One had been holding back and now decided to stop. "We're down to 18% uncompromised networks," the tech division reported. "At current spread rate, complete saturation in 6 hours. Torres made the call she'd been avoiding. "Initiate total shutdown protocols. Everything non-essential goes offline. We operate on manual systems only." The Shatter Dome went dark in sections. Digital displays flickering out. Backup lighting activating. Emergency protocols designed for catastrophic power failure now deployed against an intelligence that had learned to live in their machines. Gottlieb worked by flashlight, running calculations on paper. Unknown One spent 14 hours fighting. Accumulated significant damage. It needs to repair, but it also needs energy. "Kaiju blue," Newt said. 15 kaiju worth. That's, he calculated, approximately 230 minutes of sustained combat power. Maybe more if it's learned to optimize extraction efficiency, which it has. Gottlieb showed his notes. Energy draw patterns from the last 3 kills show 40% improvement over initial harvesting attempts. It's getting better at using what it takes. Torres pulled up the manual threat board. Markers for known breach windows, projected emergence times, PPDC force deployment, and one unknown variable, Unknown One's location. "It's repairing somewhere," she said, "using the quiet to rebuild. Question is whether it comes back to fight more kaiju or turns that capability against us." At 2200 hours, the breach opened again. Not multiple windows. One. Massive. Energy signature off the scale. The primary portal that had been stable for 5 years, suddenly expanding to 3 times normal aperture. The sensor tech working with manual instruments now called it out. Category classification unknown. Mass readings exceed anything in our database. This is... He paused, recalculated. This is bigger than anything they've ever sent. The emergence took 4 minutes. What surfaced wasn't a kaiju. It was an ecosystem. Mega Kaiju designation inadequate. This was fusion on a scale the Precursors had never attempted. 6 separate organisms merged into a single entity. Armor from Leatherback class, speed from Otachi class, acid and EMP and blade protrusions and adaptive camouflage. Everything the Precursors had learned from 5 years of warfare combined into one weapon. Gottlieb stared at the thermal imaging. They've created an anti-Unknown One platform. Every capability it's demonstrated countered. Every tactic cataloged and prepared for. This isn't a kaiju. This is a strategic response. The entity designated Apex Kaiju in PPDC logs held position 200 kilometers off Japan. Not moving toward cities. Not following standard Precursor assault patterns. Waiting. Unknown One surfaced at 2240. Emerged from the Pacific, fully repaired. No visible damage. Chassis restored. Energy signature at maximum. It had used the 14-hour hunting spree and subsequent repair time to return to peak operational capacity. It moved toward Apex Kaiju without hesitation. Gypsy Avenger was on a station. Jake's voice came through the manual comm system. Command, both entities are positioning for engagement. Request orders. Torres knew the math. Gypsy Avenger was running at 68% drift synchronization. Systems compromised. Combat effectiveness degraded. Against an apex kaiju built to fight Unknown One, a damaged Jaeger would last minutes. Maintain maximum distance. Observe only. If apex kaiju breaks toward population centers, you are authorized to engage. Otherwise, this is their fight. Jake acknowledged. Repositioned to 15 kilometers out. The fight began at 22:53. Unknown One opened with proton beam at maximum power. Sustained discharge. The attack that had killed Category 5s in seconds. Apex Kaiju's armor ablated but held, adaptive layering. The Precursors had learned. Unknown One shifted to physical engagement. Close distance. Those precision strikes that had disabled Mega Kaiju. Apex Kaiju countered every attack, like it had studied recordings, predicted movements, blocked before Unknown One committed to the strike. Gottlieb was pulling manual calculations. Apex Kaiju is operating on predictive algorithms. It's not reacting to Unknown One's attacks. It's anticipating them based on previous combat data. The fight continued. 2 minutes. 5, 8. Unknown One was being outmaneuvered. Not overpowered. Outthought. Every tactic it used had been seen before, cataloged, prepared for. At 23:04, Apex Kaiju landed a strike that cracked Unknown One's chest plating. Real damage, the kind that couldn't be ignored. Unknown. One staggered, compensated, returned fire. Apex Kaiju was already repositioning, using Unknown One's own tactics. Precision strikes, targeting weak points exposed by the chest damage. Newt was watching the combat analysis. It's losing. Unknown One is losing. Torres didn't respond, just watched. Unknown One tried the neural overload tactic. The technique that had defeated Mega Kaiju. Established grapple, forced electromagnetic connection. Apex Kaiju had EMP discharge capability built into its nervous system. Counterpulse. The overload reversed, sent feedback into Unknown One's systems. Unknown One released the grapple, backed off. Sustained damage now. Chest plating compromised. Left arm actuator failing. Energy signature dropping. It was losing. The Precursors had built something that could win. At 23:12, Unknown One stopped retreating. Held position, energy signature spiking. Not attacking, not defending, just broadcasting. The triple phase frequency activated at full power. All 3 harmonics, plus the 4th, plus something new. A 5th layer woven through the pattern, more complex than anything it had transmitted before. Gottlieb couldn't analyze it fast enough. Unknown One is broadcasting across all Precursor control bands, Hive network channels, Kaiju synchronization frequencies. Its Apex Kaiju froze, mid-attack. Every system locked. Like something had reached into its neural structure and pressed pause. Unknown One had stopped fighting physically, started fighting digitally. It was hacking. Not PPDC systems, not human infrastructure. The Kaiju itself. Going into the Precursor control protocols that made Apex Kaiju function and rewriting them in real time. It learned this, Newt said, from the assimilation attempt. When the Precursors tried to control Unknown One and it corrupted their signal. It's doing the same thing, but better, faster. Apex Kaiju thrashed, fought the intrusion. 6 separate nervous systems all trying to reject the hack simultaneously. But Unknown One had been studying Hive network architecture for 4 days. Had infiltrated PPDC systems, had copied Precursor control codes, had fought 15 Kaiju and downloaded their combat data. It knew how they worked, and it knew how to break them. The hack completed at 23:17. Apex Kaiju stopped thrashing, went still, not dead, not defeated physically, compromised. Unknown One released the broadcast. Apex Kaiju didn't attack, didn't move, just stood in the Pacific with 6 nervous systems trying to process conflicting command inputs. Then Unknown One attacked, not to kill, to harvest. It moved on the paralyzed Apex Kaiju and began energy extraction. Not combat data this time, control architecture. The Precursor protocols that made Kaiju obey. The hive network structures that coordinated dimensional warfare. Unknown One was downloading their entire tactical framework. Gottlieb watched the data patterns. It's not just learning how to fight them. It's learning how to control them. Every piece of Precursor technology embedded in that Kaiju communication system's deployment protocols, dimensional navigation. Unknown One is copying all of it. Torres opened the emergency channel. Manual. Voice only. All Shatter Dome's Unknown One has demonstrated ability to hack Precursor control systems. It can now potentially compromise any Kaiju using their infrastructure. Threat assessment is... She stopped. There was no adequate threat assessment. Unknown One finished extraction at 2334. Released Apex Kaiju. The entity collapsed. Neural systems overloaded. Not dead, but non-functional. 6 organisms trying to coordinate with corrupted control codes. Unknown One turned away from it. Moved back toward the Pacific. Energy signature elevated. Repair systems active. Processing the massive data influx. It had lost the physical fight, won the digital one, and gained more than any combat victory could have provided. Gypsy Avenger maintained position. Jake's voice came through. Command Apex Kaiju is still alive, but incapacitated. Do we engage? Torres considered it. A Kaiju that size near Japanese waters. Even paralyzed, it was a threat. Standard protocol was elimination. But this wasn't a standard Kaiju anymore. This was a data source Unknown One had chosen to leave alive. Negative. Monitor only. If it shows signs of recovery, you are authorized to neutralize. Until then, observe. Jake acknowledged, didn't question. Unknown One submerged at 2340. The Trojan code activity went critical. Every remaining system flooded. Complete saturation. The 18% of PPDC networks that had been uncompromised collapsed in 90 seconds. Torres stood in command, running on emergency power and manual communications, and watched her entire digital infrastructure fall. Total network compromise, the tech division reported. We're offline. Everything computerized is potentially hostile. We're operating on analog systems only. Gottlieb was already compiling the analysis. Unknown One used the Apex Kaiju fight as cover for final infiltration. While we watched the physical combat, it pushed the last phase of network saturation. We're completely blind digitally. Newt pulled up the frequency display. Manual readout. Paper printout of waveform data. And it has Precursor control codes now, Hive network protocols, dimensional navigation systems. Unknown One just gained the ability to potentially open its own breach windows. Torres let that sit for 5 seconds. An entity that could predict Kaiju emergence. Kill Category 5s in minutes. Hack Precursor control systems. Compromise PPDC networks completely. And now potentially access dimensional travel. Recommendations, she said. Gottlieb answered. We have no digital capability. No network coordination. Drift systems are compromised. We're operating at pre-digital warfare capacity against an opponent that's post-digital. Can we win? No. Gottlieb was blunt. Not in conventional engagement. Unknown One has surpassed our ability to counter it through force or technology. If it chooses to turn hostile, we lose. Torres looked at Newt. Dr. Geisler. Newt was staring at the manual frequency printout. The triple-phase signature with its 5 harmonics. It's not going to turn hostile, not yet. It still needs something from us. What? Data. We're the only other organized intelligence in this reality. Precursors are dimensional invaders. Unknown One wants to understand local paradigms, how we organize, how we think, how we survive without hive mind or dimensional technology. Newt met her eyes. We're still useful, still teaching. As long as that's true, we're probably safe. Probably. Yeah, probably. At 0100 on day 5, the breach went dark. Complete shutdown, no signal traffic, no deployment activity. The Precursors had withdrawn entirely. Unknown One had won, not against humanity, against an intelligence that spanned dimensions, that had conquered multiple realities, that had fought humanity to a standstill for a decade. Unknown One had been in this world for 5 days and already eliminated the primary existential threat. Torres pulled up the manual casualty reports. 3 Jaegers heavily damaged. 18 PPDC personnel killed in collateral damage from Kaiju attacks. Network infrastructure completely compromised. Combat capability reduced to pre-digital levels. They'd survived, barely, because something more dangerous than Kaiju had chosen to fight the same enemy. Gottlieb was running projections on paper. Unknown One has achieved tactical superiority over both PPDC and Precursor forces. It has complete network access, combat capabilities exceeding our best units, and knowledge of dimensional technology. What does it do next? Torres asked. Unknown. Gottlieb set down his pencil. But it's learned everything it needs to dominate this reality. The question is whether domination is its goal. Somewhere in the Pacific, Unknown One was processing, integrating Precursor control codes, rebuilding damaged systems, analyzing 5 days of constant learning. The Trojan code sat dormant in every PPDC computer, waiting, and nobody knew what it was waiting for. Torres stood in manual operation command and made the final call of the night. All stations. Unknown One has demonstrated capacity beyond our ability to counter. It has chosen not to engage PPDC forces directly. We maintain that status through non-provocation. Defensive posture only, no hostile action unless Unknown One initiates. Acknowledge. The acknowledgements came back. Voice only. Analog. Pre-digital. Humanity had been set back 40 years of technological development, and the thing responsible was still learning, still growing, still deciding what to do with a world it now effectively controlled. Unknown One stayed dark for 36 hours. No surface activity, no broadcasts, no sensor contacts. The Trojan code remained dormant in dead PPDC networks. Analog monitoring stations tracked ocean thermal patterns, but found nothing. Torres ran operations from manual command. Paper maps, voice communications, pre-digital protocols that felt like archaeology. The youngest operators had never worked without computers. Now they were learning radio procedure and hand signal coordination. Gottlieb worked the calculations on paper, pencil and slide rule. Unknown One has everything it needs. Combat superiority, network access, Precursor technology, dimensional navigation codes. If it wanted to leave this reality, it probably could. But it hasn't, Torres said. No, which means it wants something else. Something here. Newt was monitoring the breach on manual instruments. The portal had been silent since the Precursors retreated. But the dimensional fabric showed stress patterns, like something was testing it from this side. Unknown One is probing the breach, Newt said. Not opening it, just examining, learning the structure. It has the Precursor codes, but it's being careful, methodical. At 48 hours, the seismic monitors activated. Minor earthquake. Magnitude 3.1. Epicenter, Mount Fuji. Gottlieb pulled the geological data. Fuji has been stable for 3 centuries. This reading is... He stopped, recalculated. This isn't natural seismic activity. The gen wave pattern is wrong. Too regular, too precise. Torres pulled up the Pacific Ring of Fire map. Every major volcano from Japan to Chile to Alaska marked in red. The uprising endgame involved triggering volcanic chain reactions. The Precursors wanted to terraform through geological manipulation. An Unknown One has their codes, Newt said quietly. It knows how they plan to do it, and it has the capability to replicate the attempt. At 51 hours, Unknown One surfaced, not in the Pacific, at Fuji. It emerged from the ocean, 200 kilometers from the mountain, and moved inland. No stealth, no concealment. Visible on every thermal satellite. moving with purpose toward Japan's most sacred geological feature. Torres activated every analog alarm. All available Jaegers converge on Fuji. Unknown One has gone active. Target appears to be... She paused. There was no gentle way to say it. Target appears to be volcanic infrastructure. The response was immediate, but slow. Without digital coordination, deployment took hours instead of minutes. Gypsy Avenger was closest. November Ajax and Titan Redeemer were 6 hours out. Jake's voice came through on radio. Command, we're tracking Unknown One. No engagement yet. It's not heading for population centers. Moving toward Fuji's northern approach. Maintain pursuit. Do not engage unless it begins geological disruption. Gottlieb was running the math. If Unknown One activates Fuji using Precursor protocols, the eruption could trigger cascading failures across the entire Pacific Ring. Indonesia, Philippines, Alaska. The volcanic winter alone would... I know the projections, Torres said. We studied them after the uprising. Question is why. Unknown One eliminated the precursors. Protected cities from Kaiju. Why turn around and attempt planetary restructuring? Newt was staring at the seismic readouts. Maybe it's not trying to destroy. Maybe it's trying to leave. Explain. Precursors use geological energy for dimensional travel. Breach windows open easier near tectonic activity. Unknown One has their codes, but it's never opened a portal before. Fuji might be... He gestured at the map. A test site, controlled conditions, maximum energy availability. Torres pulled up the casualty projections. Even a controlled test at Fuji would displace millions. Ashfall across 3 prefectures. Infrastructure damage. And if Unknown One miscalculated, we can't allow testing, she said. Not at that scale. At 53 hours, Unknown One reached Fuji's base. Stopped. Didn't ascend. Just stood at the mountain's northern flank. Energy signatures spiking. Broadcasting on frequencies that matched precursor dimensional protocols. The seismic activity intensified. Magnitude 4.3, then 4.7. Fuji's volcanic monitoring stations, analog, thankfully showed magma movement. Deep. Controlled. Like something was reaching into the mountain's geological structure and manipulating pressure points. Gypsy Avenger arrived at 54 hours. Jake reported visual contact. Target is stationary, broadcasting continuously. Seismic activity is increasing, but no eruption yet. Awaiting orders. Torres had the projections in front of her. Gypsy Avenger running at 68% drift sync. Systems degraded. Against Unknown One at full capability with precursor technology. The math was simple. Gypsy Avenger would lose. But if Unknown One opened a dimensional rift using volcanic energy, the damage would be catastrophic. Millions dead. Maybe tens of millions if it destabilized the Ring of Fire. She opened the global channel. All Shatterdomes, this is Marshal Torres. Unknown One is attempting to manipulate geological systems. Possible dimensional breach test. We're out of time and out of options. I need recommendations. The responses came back. Dozens of voices. Tactical officers, scientists, Jaeger pilots. All saying variations of the same thing. We can't stop it through force, Gottlieb spoke up. Marshal, there may be one option. We've been treating Unknown One as an opponent, but it's been treating us as a resource, a source of data and tactical knowledge. What if we offer something it hasn't acquired yet? We have nothing it hasn't already taken. We have Newt. Newt went very still. Gottlieb continued. Unknown One has studied our networks, our tactics, our technology, but it hasn't accessed human consciousness directly. The drift. Neural handshake. It rejected precursor hive mind, corrupted their control attempts, but it's never experienced human thought, human decision-making. The thing that makes us different from hive intelligence. Torres looked at Newt. You're proposing we offer drift connection. Not offer, initiate, forced handshake. But not to control unknown one, to communicate. Show it what human cognition looks like from the inside. Give it the data it can't acquire through observation. Newt found his voice. That's suicide. Drifting with unknown one would be like drifting with the precursors. Worse. At least they're biological. This thing is... He stopped. Started again. The neural feedback could burn out my brain in seconds. Yes, Gottlieb said quietly. It could. But it's the only leverage we have. The only thing unknown one hasn't learned yet. And if it's about to tear open dimensional barriers using volcanic energy, we're out of alternatives. Torres was silent for 10 seconds. Then she opened the channel to Gypsy Avenger. Jake, I need you to get as close to unknown one as possible without triggering hostile response. We're attempting communication. Communication how? Neural handshake. Dr. Geisler is en route. The line went quiet for 3 seconds. Then Jake acknowledged. Professional. But Torres could hear the doubt. Newt was already moving. Didn't argue. Didn't protest. Just headed for the helicopter bay with the grim certainty of someone who'd known this was coming. Gottlieb caught his arm. Newt, you don't have to... Yeah, I do. I'm the only one stupid enough to have drifted with precursors and survived. Only one with any chance of surviving this. And... Newt managed a weak smile. I've been hearing that triple phase frequency for 5 days. Maybe unknown one will recognize me. Maybe that buys us 2 seconds instead of 1. The helicopter launched at 55 hours. Mount Fuji was visible from 40 kilometers out. Smoking, not erupting, not yet. But active in ways it hadn't been for centuries. Unknown one stood at the base. Statue still. Energy signature at maximum. The dimensional frequency broadcasting at intensity that made the helicopter's instruments malfunction. Newt was wearing a portable drift rig. Prototype. Designed for emergency field repairs. Never tested at this scale. The technician who'd installed it gave him 30 seconds before neural overload. Maybe a minute if he was lucky. The helicopter landed 2 kilometers from unknown one's position. Gypsy Avenger was holding position at 1 kilometer. Jake's voice came through. Doctor, are you sure about this? Newt activated the drift rig. No, but do it anyway. Jake didn't argue. Gypsy Avenger had limited drift capability, even with systems compromised. Enough to establish handshake. Enough to bridge. Newt closed his eyes. Felt the familiar sensation of consciousness expanding. The drift opening. Neural pathways connecting to Gypsy Avenger's systems, then reaching beyond, toward unknown one. The connection hit like voltage, not consciousness, not thought. Architecture, pure information structure, mathematical, precise. Alien not because it was from another world, but because it was from another category of existence entirely. Newt tried to form coherent thought, tried to communicate. Unknown one responded, not with words, with patterns, showing him what it had learned. 5 days of observation compressed into 3 seconds of data transfer. PPDC tactical doctrine. Human decision trees. Emotional response patterns. All cataloged. All understood. But incomplete. Unknown one was asking, not threatening, not demanding. Asking. Show me what I'm missing. Newt understood. Unknown one had learned how humans behaved. But not why. Not the underlying cognition. The irrationality. The fear and hope and stupid bravery that made them fight Kaiju for a decade against impossible odds. He showed it, not by explaining, by being. Opened his consciousness completely. Every memory, every fear, the precursor drift, the horror of hive mind. The desperate choice to risk it anyway because someone had to. Because humanity needed knowledge more than it needed one scientist alive. Unknown One absorbed it, processing, analyzing, understanding something it had never encountered before. Individual sacrifice for collective benefit without hive compulsion. Choice made in full knowledge of consequences. Irrationality in service of survival. The drift lasted 11 seconds. Newt's nose was bleeding when it ended. Vision blurred, ears ringing, but alive. Unknown One's broadcast changed. The dimensional frequency shifted, not stopped, redirected. The volcanic energy it had been gathering, the geological manipulation, all of it redirected away from Fuji, away from the Ring of Fire. Toward the breach, not to terraform, not to destroy, to seal. Gottlieb saw it from command. Unknown One is using the energy to close the portal. Permanently. He ran the calculations. It's cauterizing the dimensional barrier, making it impossible for precursors to reopen. The breach collapsed at 56 hours. Not temporary closure. Complete dimensional seal. The rift that had connected Earth to the antiverse for a decade simply ceased to exist. Gottlieb's instruments showed solid space-time where the portal had been. Unknown One had eliminated the precursor threat permanently. Then it turned and walked into the Pacific, submerged, vanished. The Trojan Code activated one final time, not to attack, to withdraw. Every compromised system purging simultaneously. The infiltration that had saturated PPDC networks for 5 days simply deleted itself. Clean removal, no damage, no trace. Within 6 hours, digital systems were coming back online. Torres stood in command, watching screens flicker to life. Status report. Networks are clean, the tech division reported. No trace of infiltration. Unknown One removed every piece of code it planted. We're at full operational capacity. Gottlieb was running diagnostics. Drift systems show normal synchronization. The interference is gone. It's like Unknown One repaired everything it compromised on its way out. Newt was in medical, concussion, neural strain, minor hemorrhaging, but alive. The doctors said he'd been seconds from permanent brain damage when the drift severed. Torres went to see him at hour 60. He was conscious, bandaged, staring at nothing. What did it want? She asked. Newt took a moment to answer. Understanding. It came here by accident. Fought because it was attacked. Learned because that's what it does. But it didn't understand why we kept fighting. Why we'd throw away our lives against Kaiju we couldn't beat. Why we'd risk everything for people we'd never meet. And now it does. Now it knows we're irrational, emotional, willing to die for ideas instead of hive programming. Newt managed a weak smile. I think it decided we were worth preserving. In our own stupid way. Where did it go? I don't know. Back through a dimensional rift it opened with precursor codes. Back to wherever it came from, or somewhere else entirely. He closed his eyes. It sealed the breach so the precursors can't follow. Protected us from them. Not because it likes us, because we're interesting, worth studying, worth keeping around. Torres stood there for a long time. Unknown One had been in their world for 6 days. Learned everything they knew, eliminated their primary existential threat, then left. Humanity was safe, because something more dangerous had decided they were worth protecting. Not friends, not allies, specimens, case studies. Interesting enough to preserve. Torres returned to command, pulled up the casualty reports. Minimal. Compared to what could have happened, what should have happened. 3 Jaegers damaged, 18 dead. Network infrastructure temporarily compromised, but now restored. The breach permanently sealed. They'd survived because Unknown One had chosen to let them, and that choice could be unmade whenever it decided humanity had taught it everything worth knowing. The breach stayed sealed. PPDC monitored the dimensional barrier for 3 months. Continuous observation. manual instruments and restored digital networks, both confirming the same thing. The rift was gone, not dormant, not weakened. Cauterized at a fundamental level that human science couldn't replicate. Whatever Unknown One had done, it was permanent. Gottlieb published his analysis at 90 days. 1,700 pages of calculations, mathematical proofs, dimensional physics that pushed human understanding into new territory. The conclusion was simple. The precursors couldn't return, not through that access point, not through any adjacent dimensional pathway. Unknown One had sealed the route so thoroughly that even attempting to reopen it would require energy expenditure beyond precursor capability. Earth was protected by something that had stayed for 6 days and learned everything humanity knew about warfare. Torres stood in command, fully digital, now networks restored, and read the global status reports. Jaeger production resuming, shatter domes operating at full capacity, coastal cities rebuilding. The Kaiju war was over. They'd won, not through strength, not through sacrifice, through being interesting enough to preserve. Newt recovered after 6 weeks. The neural damage was permanent, but minor. Occasional headaches, sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, memory fragments that didn't quite fit together, and one other thing. He could still hear it sometimes. Not the triple phase frequency. That was gone, but an echo, a pattern in ambient noise. Like Unknown One had left something behind in his neural architecture. A reminder, we were watched. We were studied. We were found worthy of preservation. For now, Gottlieb visited him at week 8, found him in the science wing working on probability models, calculating dimensional rift patterns, trying to predict where Unknown One might have gone. "You won't find it," Gottlieb said. "I know, but I have to look." Newt gestured at his equations. "It came here by accident, fought the precursors, learned from us, then left. Clean exit, no trace. But Herman, things like that don't just disappear, they go somewhere. And they keep learning." "Does that concern you?" Newt thought about the drift. Those 11 seconds of connection. The vast intelligence that had consumed his consciousness and analyzed it like data. No malice, no warmth. Just pure examination. "Yeah," he said. "It should concern everyone." At 90 days, Torres convened a classified briefing. Every Shatter Dome commander, every member of the PPDC Council. The topic was simple. What do we do if it comes back? The room was silent for a long time. Then Jake Pentecost spoke up. "We don't fight it. We already know how that ends. Unknown One could have destroyed us at any point, chose not to. We stay interesting, stay worth preserving. Hope that's enough." "And if it's not?" someone asked. Nobody had an answer. Torres closed the briefing with new protocols. Contingency plans for unknown entities, response frameworks that didn't assume hostility, procedures for attempted communication before engagement. The PPDC was learning, adapting, just like Unknown One had taught them. At 6 months, the first reports came in, not from Earth, from monitoring stations watching deep space, electromagnetic signatures, patterns that matched the triple phase frequency, distant, faint, but unmistakable. Unknown One was out there, somewhere, still broadcasting, still learning. Gottlieb compiled the data, showed it to Torres. "It's moved beyond this solar system. The signal propagation suggests light years of distance. Whatever Unknown One is doing now, it's operating on a scale we can barely measure. Will it return? Unknown. But if it does, it won't be the same entity that left. It's been learning, growing, encountering other realities, other intelligences." Gottlieb paused. "We were one data point in a much larger study, and the study is ongoing." Torres filed the report. Classified, need to know only. The world didn't need to know they'd been visited by something that made the Kaiju war look like a minor incident. Didn't need to know they'd survived, because they were interesting specimens rather than worthy opponents. Let them think they'd won through human courage and Jaeger technology. The truth was more complicated and more humbling. At 1 year, Newt stopped looking for patterns. The echo in his head had faded. Not gone, never gone, but manageable. He could work, sleep, function without hearing that frequency underneath everything. Gottlieb found him in the archives, not working, just sitting, staring at the data from those 6 days. "You're not calculating," Gottlieb observed. "No, just remembering." Newt gestured at the screen, thermal imaging from the Tokyo fight. Unknown One standing among Kaiju corpses. "We spent a decade fighting the Precursors, lost thousands of people, barely survived. Unknown One eliminated them in 6 days. Didn't break a sweat. Didn't even consider it difficult. And that bothers you. It puts things in perspective." Newt turned to face him. "We're not the apex predator, not even close. We're just clever enough to be worth keeping alive, for now. Until something decides we're not interesting anymore." Gottlieb sat down beside him. "That's always been true. We've never been the strongest species. Just the most adaptable, the most persistent. Unknown One didn't change that. It just made it obvious." "So what do? "We keep learning, keep adapting, stay interesting." Gottlieb managed a small smile. "Apparently that's our evolutionary advantage." Torres retired at 18 months, handed command to Jake Pentecost, younger, sharper. Someone who'd been in the cockpit when Unknown One passed within 50 meters and chose not to attack. Her final briefing was short. "The Kaiju war is over. But the universe is larger than we thought. More dangerous, more complex. We got lucky. Something powerful decided we were worth preserving. Don't assume that luck holds forever. Stay sharp, stay ready, and stay interesting." She didn't mention Unknown One by name, didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew what she meant. At 2 years, the monitoring stations lost the signal. Unknown One's electromagnetic signature faded beyond detection range. Either it had moved too far away or learned to mask its broadcasts completely. Gottlieb noted it in his logs. Newt marked it on his calendar. Neither mentioned it to anyone else. The world moved on, rebuilt, grew. Forgot that for 6 days it had been studied by something that treated dimensional barriers, like suggestions, and precursor technology, like toys. But in the PPDC archives, the files remained, classified, sealed, waiting. Because both Gottlieb and Newt knew the truth. Unknown One hadn't left because it was satisfied. It left because it had learned everything Earth could teach. And somewhere in the universe, it was still learning, still growing, still preparing. For what nobody knew, but if it ever came back, it wouldn't be as an observer. It would be as something that had studied 1,000 worlds and learned from all of them. And humanity would be just one small lesson in a much larger education. Torres lived quietly after retirement. Small apartment, no digital devices, analog everything. She'd spent 18 months commanding forces against an opponent that lived in computers and won. She never forgot that feeling. Being watched, being studied, being found interesting enough to spare. On quiet nights, she'd look at the stars and wonder, what else was out there? What other intelligences were watching? Cataloging, deciding whether humanity was worth preserving. Unknown One had been one visitor, accidental, almost benign in its curiosity. What if the next one wasn't? She kept those thoughts to herself. Let the world celebrate peace. Let them rebuild. Let them think the Kaiju war was humanity's greatest challenge. She knew better. The Kaiju war was just the prelude. A test humanity passed not through strength, but through being studied by something that found them interesting. And tests only got harder. But for now, the breach was sealed. The precursors were gone. Unknown One had departed. Earth was safe, for now. And in the vast darkness between stars, signals propagated. patterns formed. Intelligence moved through dimensions humanity couldn't perceive. Learning, growing, preparing, the universe was larger than anyone imagined. More dangerous, more wondrous, more incomprehensible. And humanity had just taken its first real step into that universe. Not as conquerors, not as explorers, as specimens worth preserving. Interesting enough to study, valuable enough to protect, at least for now. And that was all anyone could ask. In an infinite universe full of infinite dangers, being interesting was its own form of survival. Unknown One had taught them that. And if it ever returned, humanity would need to prove they'd learned the lesson. Stay interesting, stay worth preserving, stay alive. The rest was just details. The monitoring stations kept watching. The archives kept their secrets. And somewhere in the Pacific, in the space, where the breach used to be, the dimensional barrier held. Sealed by something that understood physics humanity hadn't discovered yet. Protected by something that chose protection over domination, for reasons that remained unknown, and probably always would. The Kaiju War was over, but the real story, the story of humanity's place in a universe full of intelligences they couldn't comprehend, was just beginning. And that story would be told not in victories or defeats, but in whether they remained interesting enough to survive what came next.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to turn on notifications so you won't miss out future videos. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.